All right, guys, time to ramp it up a tiny bit more. You've been playing with a couple of virtual experiments. I remember the gizmos where you tried to alter variables with a plant, an underwater plant, just to see what happened. And then remember, you also had the ability to plant some seeds virtually. And you got to change variables with that too, give them fertilizer, compost, light, water, etc. So now we want to really, really quickly, this is going to be a short one today. We want to introduce a new term, something called biomass, which if we were at school would be another nerd word up on the wall, but it's actually pretty simple. So to figure out what this is, I want you to think about these two questions. Think of the gizmo activity that we did. Do seeds have mass? We've talked about mass. Any type of matter that takes up space, certain volume, and as the plant grows from the seed, in the virtual experiment and in seeds in real life, you should be planting seeds right now if you haven't, outside in real life. As the plant grows, does the mass get bigger? And the answer to both of those, I would hope that's kind of obvious to you, is that yeah, of course seeds have mass. They're matter. We can hold them in our hands. And then as plants grow, you guys already knew they get bigger. So we just want to be aware that yes, their height increases, but yesterday you were able to see, or a couple days ago, that the mass increases. So all scientists do, whenever we're talking about in an ecosystem, organisms like plants, and it applies to animals too, the mass that they have, we call that biomass. Bio meaning living. So it's not even a big nerd word. It's just we're going to be focused on how that mass, not in a physical science sense, but in a biology, ecology sense, changes and affects other organisms. So please be aware. We're going to focus on plants today, but all of the organisms in an ecosystem, and think of your eco scenario as well. All of the organisms, all the plants, animals, the decomposers, the bacteria and fungi, everything, all their waste, all the discarded matter, like it says here, like dead leaves that fall for trees, any of that, if it came from living organisms, it's considered biomass. Because bio meaning life, essentially, most of that is available as food for somebody else at some point. We've been talking about food webs. So this biomass is a big important part of food webs. So if it has mass and it's part of an organism, or it came from an organism, we call it biomass. So from now on, here on out, you're going to hear and use that term biomass. So what we want to do today is, you've already done a couple of experiments messing around. Now I'm going to ask you to look at data from somebody else's experiment, where they planted bean seeds, just like you did. But you're going to get to see what variables they changed, and I'm going to give you their data and see if we can figure out what's going on. So we're going to focus on, well, and we already actually have flirted with this, so you guys have an advantage over the other seventh grade students who didn't do the gizmos. How do producers grow and increase their biomass? I mean, we know they can do it. You saw it. You can see it every day in your life. You're not a producer, but you're an organism. You grow and you're increasing your biomass. So how do producers, we want to start with producers. Remember, they're the first step in the food web. How do they grow and increase in biomass? And we've already looked at that a little bit. So to do that, you're going to be given a set of data it's kind of small and hard to see here. And what they did, the students planted 500 grams of bean seeds, and they ran 6 different trials. They put them in 6 different environments: A, B, C, D, E, and F. And you can see the conditions, the variables, abiotic factors that they changed up here, and it gives you the data: the starting mass, the mass of the seeds and plants, well, they're seeds to start with, and then the mass of those organisms, the beans, after they've sprouted and turned into plants, hopefully, after excuse me, after 3 weeks. So you're going to read through that and look at that. Notice that you are going to have a pen or pen and pencil, or just some scratch paper handy, or a notebook, because I am going to ask you to calculate the mass change. What was it at the start? They were all exactly the same. And what was it at the end? So did the mass go up? Did the mass go down? Did the mass stay the same? And what I'm going to ask you to do is to use this data to answer that focus question. Now, I'm also going to post, and I'm going to ask you, while you're looking at this, I want you to think about some questions. This is my way of saying hint, hint. Um, things you want to consider, like what materials you're going to be trying to think about. What do they need to make food? You've already looked at that. You already have some big hints in there. Looking at the data, what conditions resulted in an increase in biomass? Maybe if you look at the data, you're going to see not all of them did. Uh, what 5 factors were tested? Like, what did they change? Very similar to your gizmo. Like, you were able to adjust light, you were able to adjust water, you were able to adjust CO2. What did the experimenters change? In each one, they changed one variable. Uh, so did the beans grow and produce? You're going to go back and have to look when all 5 factors are present. And then how much biomass? You want to consider these two. Did they all produce the same amount of biomass? Did they all get, that's another way of saying, did they all get bigger at the same rates? And really important when you're going to see, I want you to think about and determine from the data, did the plants, did the bean seeds need all of the factors to grow and produce biomass? Some of those experiments you're going to see, some of the trials, they took away one factor. I want you to pay attention to what happens. Again, this is just like your gizmo. So what factors are needed? And then be very, very careful. You're going to make a claim in a few minutes after you look at the data. And I'm going to ask you to write a CER, claim, evidence, reasoning. So what do they need? This is the question you're going to be answering. What is your evidence? So remember, you're going to be making claims when you write in your exit ticket. I'm writing a short conclusion, and I want you to make claims. What factors do plants have to have, according to that experiment, to produce biomass? In other words, to get bigger. Because if they're growing bigger, they're gaining more mass, they're producing biomass, which is important because remember that biomass becomes food for somebody else. The mass they're gaining is actually tissue in the plant. It's the stem, it's the leaves, it's the innards of the plant. It could be the fruits, it could be the seeds. If they're growing, they're producing it, that becomes important. That becomes food for somebody else. So again, you're going to go back and look at this data, all of these data in this experiment, read it carefully, even though I gave you an overview. And then in the exit ticket, I'm going to ask you to write a conclusion. You're going to make claims and use evidence to support your claims and give reasons as to why. Right? And remember, we're after trying to answer this guy. How do producers grow and increase their biomass? All right, you've got a lucky head start with the gizmos, so I think you already know some of the answers, but we want to use the data from this experiment here to answer that. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn you guys loose.